Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another episode here of the Freshman 15 College Football Podcast. A major, huge week in college football. A lot going on. We had championship week last week and a lot of movers and shakers in the CFP. So not going to mess around too much, get right into it. First off, Tyler, feeling better this week?
I'm feeling a little bit better, emotionally and football wise, but like healthy and like, man, I'm congested. I apologize if I cough on this thing, but we're gonna pound through this bad boy.
Hey, we got this, man. We got this. So to kind of carry from that, right? So, as a matter of fact, let's go ahead because you guys, like you and your guys, Ohio State, you are the benefactors of last week in college football.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at this thing, right? Like looking at the rankings last week, right? As we went to last week, championship weekend, the top four were like this as follows. We had number 1, Georgia, number 2, Michigan, number 3, TCU, and number 4, USC. So going into last weekend, kind of going backwards a little bit, what were your primary thoughts going into last weekend?
So it was one of those things where, like, I said it before, it's you had this notion that this thing was going to play itself out. I've said it before multiple times that it was going to play itself out, and it's like you didn't trust, like you and I, we didn't trust TCU, but we didn't expect the other outcome that we're going to talk about later. But like my initial gut was like, well, maybe we picked the Saturday, the upset special, but it's just like, is this really going to happen? And the one came down to the wire, but the other one was like, wow. So
Decisive. Yeah, man. And I think when it came to last week, right, I didn't expect it to be very eventful aside from TCU. Like, it's going to play out. We said it's going to play out, but not the way that I expected. I thought the TCU game was going to happen. It was a given, but I didn't expect anything to happen with Georgia and LSU. They got handled, LSU. And I was surprised about Purdue and Michigan too, because it was a lot closer for a longer period of time than I expected it was.
Yeah.
Until, of course, the Michigan talent took over. Donovan Edwards running the ball great. Their overall talent on defense took over. So there is one big surprise, which leads us right into our Saturday spotlight, which happened on Friday last week, that being the USC Trojans. So if I can just say this, Mike, I'm really disappointed in USC.
Yeah.
They're not in the CFP. And you know me, I'm a little bit partial to USC somewhat, but it is their own fault. Like all this is their own fault. We talked about it last week too. We said that, hey, the USC defense is going to show their ass. And they did once again show their ass on national TV. And they couldn't help an offense that really needed a boost. Like they really needed some help in that game. And maybe the linebacker Eric Gentry made some flash plays here and there, but overall, they couldn't get any stops. And they were at a major, major disadvantage. And I think even with Utah, right, that drive before the half where you have it like a 1st and 20, then it's a 25-yard run, and it just kept moving the ball and moving the ball and moving the ball. It just got worse from that score at halftime. And I think at one point the graphic said USC had 22 missed tackles.
Yeah.
22 missed tackles?
Yeah.
Man, that's unheard of. That's unheard of, man. And in the running game, for Utah, it just put them in a box. Jaquindon Jackson put them in a box. And I know you have your own thoughts on Caleb Williams, but I think for him, he just couldn't Superman this team. This defense could not be carried to a win. And I'm not going to bash on USC entirely without giving credit to Utah because they handled their business. Yeah. Like they went in there, they handled their business. They were very confident. They beat this team again, and they did it decisively. But that's my take on that. But what are your thoughts on our Saturday spotlight that was on Friday last week?
So, they were up 17-3, and you're like, man, this is going to be a blowout. It was like middle through the second quarter. It's like, well, man, this thing is turning out. And then Caleb Williams, he goes on this like 50-yard run, and he's never the same after that. And then, they get 2 quick scores. Utah does right before halftime, one with 3 minutes to go, and one with like 6 seconds left to go. And then they get the ball after halftime. And for as much as like a USC team, like their offense picks them up the entire season. And even despite their defense playing bad, and they say you gotta be sound in all 3 phases of the game. And Alex Grinch, I'm surprised he still has a job. To be honest with you, he should be gone, like far, far away, because it was the same thing. It was the same thing with him at Oklahoma, and he brought that Big 12 defense with him to USC, and he matched up against a very disciplined team. And they seem to have their number no matter what's happening. And it kind of played out like that Ohio State-Michigan game where it was close. And then at halftime, you could feel, like I said, like before, you feel that levee breaking. And the next thing you know, they've been outscored 44-7. And it's just like, wow, there's that was one-sided, and it kind of falls back on Lincoln Riley too, because if you're, I know you have a Heisman candidate quarterback and he wants to stay in, but he's doing like that Patrick Mahomes limp around the field, like I'm hurt, but he's noticeably hurt. He's not moving in the pocket. He's out of the shotgun, and every single snap, it's like if there's someone in his face, he's getting sacked or he's losing the ball, turning it over. And Lincoln Riley should have had the wherewithal to say, hey, even though you're a Heisman even though you're a Heisman candidate, we need to get you out of there, so we can still have potential to win this game, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I think that was the key, and I think you said it. That run after that, he was not the same guy, and he was very limited. Even his mechanics were dead.
Yeah,
dead in the water, man. So moving on though, because it's funny, man. We hit these upset picks a lot. I'm telling you, man. Sportsbook, DraftKings, whoever the hell is watching this podcast, you must hit us up, man. Because we're hitting these upset picks like you wouldn't believe. But the upset pick we had TCU being down by the Wildcats. So watching that game, what were you saying to yourself as it played out?
Well, it was Kansas State was up, and you're like, well, they're gonna do this, and then I'm not gonna bash on Max Duggan. He's a very good quarterback, but it seemed like all his balls were like floaters, and it just seems like he's not like a pure passer for that offense. I know he's like in the Heisman candidate now, but like it seemed like a lot of his passes are just like hung up there, almost like the Russell Wilson rainbow throws, and it gives those guys time to come and get underneath it all the time. And we've seen it late in that game with a couple late interceptions. And to really get his team back into that game, he puts the team on his back and he runs basically all the way down the field. He uses his legs, his mobility to do it. And then that's ultimately the undoing in overtime, because they couldn't punch it in on 3rd and 4th down. And
TCU, So, and I guess I'm not going to disagree with his like physical limitations, because I agree. I see that too. But I think with that game, right, it was really back and forth, and you saw everything they gave you a little bit of everything, right? Like you had the star players were putting on, they were showing off. Quentin Johnson, Deuce Vaughn, and Max Duggan, he did what he had to do. But then I think even then, Kansas State could have put them away. They were given chances to. You had the dropped interception, by the corner. Julius Brents had the drop pick. And he had a bad game of penalties.
Yeah, he was getting picked on big time. But then,
he was getting scorched, man. And it's just so many mistakes by TCU throughout the game with the penalties. And again, we know, like I said, the quarterback is not a big time thrower. He's not a flashy option there. But he left it all out there. I mean, he really did. He was spent. He was beat down. He was bruised. He was bloody. But he kept fighting. And I think even then, after the game, I think you saw it too, right? He was like really emotional at the press conference when they lost. And it's all understandable. I think it's all understandable, because he really did give it all that he has. Physical limitations or not, he gave it all that he had. The one thing I did not understand was going for it on 4th down in overtime. That's the one part I was a little bit puzzled by. And even then, it wasn't just that you went for it, it's the play selection. Yeah. They ran the ball. I'm like, the guy got you here. Put the ball in his hands. You got to ride the horse that got you there. That's the part I didn't understand. I was like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah, and it's like I believe that I'm going to show it here, but it's like they ran two plays straight out of I formation. Like, just turn around, hand the ball to your fullback. Don't allow the defensive line penetration hit right there. If you're going to do that, or like you said, have him sneak it and have your two backs push him. And then you'll see like, if you actually look at the replay, they say the ball got over. But then they say it didn't because of the way the camera angle is, and you can't tell definitively because you don't know if he's down or whatnot. And then it's just like, I understand why they went for it, because that game is such a big part of that game, and you're on like I would say like the 1/4 inch line. I mean, the 1/4 yard line. I mean, you have less than 6 inches to go, and they just couldn't get it done.
I just feel like once Kansas State had lost their top receiver, you had a chance. And I think they were a little bit limited. But maybe, again, they were scared shitless of Deuce Vaughn. I'm not really sure. And maybe that was the idea behind it. But I still feel like the ball should have been in your guys' hands, who, like you said, is a Heisman candidate. It would have made the most sense to give him the ball, give him a chance to win you the game. So I think questionable, but all the same, it's a great game. And once again, man, credit to us. We once again hitting our upset special. So prop to us, man. Prop best to us, too. So now, man, reactions we have to the CFP.
Yeah.
So with last week wrapped up, we move on to this week, and the big story is the Final Four in college football, the college football playoff.
Mhm.
And so now, as follows, we have our top four. It's official. It's number 1, Georgia, number 2, Michigan, number 3, TCU, who hangs on, and your guys, number 4, Ohio State. So what is your initial reaction to that? And please, if you can, keep it humble. What are your thoughts?
So it was when you saw USC lost, you knew it was either Ohio State or Alabama getting in, and then you don't know. And then when you go into Saturday, and it's kind of like if TCU loses big, is Ohio State and Alabama going to sneak into there? That was kind of weighing on everybody's mind, waiting for Sunday afternoon. But that one loss didn't hurt them too bad because going into it, it's chalk for the first 3, and then USC, and then Ohio State just flops with USC basically. Not in position, but like into the playoffs. And so now I was like, well, they do have the best loss because they lost to Michigan. We talked about it on our previous podcast. I'm not going to go into it again, but I think the 4 right teams are in.
I think for me, it was relief. I think that was a thing. And because I think nobody wanted to see Alabama shoehorned into the playoffs. And nobody wanted to see them forced into it. Even the thing with Nick Saban kind of politicking, I think is a bad look. Now, I do understand his point, his angle, but it's still a bad look for the game. And a person that tries to carry himself with this class, you're not unlike anybody else, huh? Like you're gonna try to save your own ass or your whole team's ass. But I think that was just a terrible look. But we as fans didn't want to see that. The collective fan base, and no one outside of Tuscaloosa wanted to see that team make it. A team that had lost to LSU, a team that had lost to Tennessee, a team that got driven to the brink by Texas. Nobody wanted to see that. And that was my concern. Like they're gonna really force them in there.
Yeah.
And then I thought also, well, maybe they somehow had favor on USC. And I think for me, it was it's going to be either you keep TCU in or it's USC. Mm-hmm. I didn't want, Ohio State. So I didn't want that. And I think we as fans get the best possible matchup. You get a possible rematch with the quarterback already chirping, already talking, JJ McCarthy. We get the rematch of the game in the college football playoff. Like that is a big time thing to have Michigan, Ohio State. And maybe for a national title, no less.
Yeah. So I know we're gonna go into this like later on, like in the next episode, but like the Ohio State Georgia game. It's a pretty favorable matchup for. I think it's gonna be a shootout because Georgia plays a lot like Michigan does. They're just a bigger team, all around. They're like, it's like the Permian Panthers versus Dallas Carter. So Dallas Carter would be Georgia, and Permian would be Michigan. But it's their styles. It kind of clashes because Georgia's really good on run defense, and Ohio State can throw the rock around the field. And it's just the same thing. Like Ohio State struggles against the run, but Georgia can run the ball. So it's gonna be a fun one, and I'm looking forward to it. That's for a different day.
Yeah, and as I say, styles make fights, so it's a lot to look forward to. So if you guys are not subscribed right now to the channel, you should be. Hit that like button, hit that sub button. We'll be back talking about more college football games as we get closer to the national title and, of course, the New Year's Six. But it's almost like talking about this as if it was a season end episode. But I mean, maybe it's a little bit because we're kind of winding down the season. It's time to kind of play out its whole course. So I have to ask you this question. In our weekly segment, we're going to broaden the question and make it a bigger time of like wider scope. Mm-hmm. In our weekly question of who either helped or hurt themselves the most in college football, let's kind of broaden that question to the entire season. Who in college football either helped or hurt themselves the most this season?
DJ, quarterback from Clemson. He 5-star recruit. He was thrust into the spotlight. He played good his first year, and then this year he comes in, and it's just like, what are you doing? He gets benched. You can't say it's the people around him because the backup plays better than he does. But he's a former 5-star recruit, and he just enters the transfer portal. So it's kind of like, where's he going to end up? I don't mind the transfer portal, but it's like what school is going to pick him up that best suits his ability? Because I know they didn't have like a giant coaching change at Clemson. Dabo Swinney's still there, but it's like who's gonna sweep in and pick him up?
Chip. Could be Chip. I mean, I think if you look for someone with the skill set that can run the offense in a similar way, I think Chip Kelly might fit in for him. So that was kind of my thought process. But I do agree that he looked bad. He does look very bad, and the way he's leaving is even worse. And how he's leaving makes it look bad. But I also pick quarterbacks too, and I stuck with quarterbacks. And of course, you know who I'm going with, my lefty brother in arms, man. It's Mike Penix. It's got to be Mike Penix. And I think so much for him as to where he's at. He's made a lot of strides this season. I talked about it before. I noticed him a couple years ago, and he was very impressive at Indiana. But he gets hurt at Indiana. He kind of moves on to Washington. It's really just an afterthought. Kind of like I almost saw him as like maybe a bridge quarterback to somebody else coming in. But he just stood out so much in that Pac-12, that loaded Pac-12 of quarterbacks between him, DTR, Caleb Williams, even Bo Nix. He's kind of stood out and emerged a little bit over the course of the season. And even at one time being mentioned as a Heisman candidate. You know, he had the win against Oregon State, the close call against UCLA. And I think for him, he's had a great year for him, the program. And then again, we see him on the national stage in the Alamo Bowl against a team like Texas that has star power with Bijan Robinson, Quinn Ewers. So I think he made the very wise choice on top of that to come back for another year. And again, cement yourself as the top quarterback of the class next year, if possible. So shout out to you again, man. My lefty brother in arms, our guy, Mike Penix.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, man. So speaking of Heisman's, though, right? Good segue, talking about accolades and awards. So if you guys remember on the channel way back in the first episode of the Freshman 15, we talked about the Heisman hopefuls, the Heisman candidates. And way back then, back in August, the guys according to Vegas were as follows. It was C.J. Stroud of Ohio State, Bryce Young of Alabama, Caleb Williams at USC, and Bijan Robinson at Texas. And also mentioned somewhere in that list was Quinn Ewers. So as it played out with everything, the heavy favorite throughout the season looked like it was Caleb Williams, who was in the driver's seat for the award for much of the season. And I got no complaints with that. I think he played phenomenal this season. Or if you're talking about C.J. Stroud, and I mean, you know it's better than anybody does. He played well without the top receiver, the top running back, and he was top notch for most of the season. So, but look, with these finalists, though, I know you have some thoughts on here. And I'll let you have your way. But here's the guys that were the finalists for the Heisman this season, and that is the aforementioned C.J. Stroud, Caleb Williams, and the surprise picks here, Max Duggan and Stetson Bennett. So I'll ask you this question. Did they get this group right?
Right. It's kind of hard to say because like you see like Hendon Hooker could have been up there, but he got hurt. So you don't get to see him those final few weeks of the season. Michael Penix, you know, he had like one or two stinkers in there. Quinn Ewers gets hurt. And Sark doesn't run Bijan like he's supposed to. A lot of that's like on coaching and injuries that you can't control. But like the guys you mentioned, they stepped up for their teams. But I think it's Caleb Williams to lose. He had 47 total touchdowns on the season, 4 interceptions. CJ had 37 and 6. So he's 10 off. And then the other two are like in their 20s. So it's not really close. So it's Caleb Williams to lose. Just cut the semantics. Don't do the stupid gala thing on TV. We know who's going to win. So yeah.
And you pointed out too, and I actually hate that they tip the selection before it's live. I hate that. And I think it's just a dog and pony show. It's really just a party, honestly. It's just a party of the former Heismans linking up, and it's basically the Heisman House commercials are way better than the actual ceremony. 10 times better. So if it's all about that, I agree with you. I would say it should be Caleb Williams. He had a great game. He fought and battled all the way in. I mean, that's the most likely option here. I do think, though, that Bijan Robinson belongs to be in the conversation over Stetson Bennett. That's just how I see it. Like you said, coaching killed him. Coaching absolutely killed him, and he should have been in New York. But I think even for that, think about it, the year with multiple quarterbacks, a struggling passing attack. And again, I just don't see the whole thing with Stetson Bennett. I feel like it's just, he's an alternate. He's what you call a Pro Bowl alternate, but for the Heisman.
Bus driver.
Beep. Oh, man. But you know what? So, Tyler, man, that should wrap our show tonight. Great show, by the way, man. But as you teased earlier, we will be back next week talking about the New Year's Six, the Sinister Six games on New Year's that we're going to be checking out. Man, any last thoughts before we head up out of here?
No, I'm excited. Like I really focus on those New Year's Six. But you know, there are like sleeper games from like December 15th to those New Year's Six, like the Cheez-It Bowl. You know, you're gonna get some good games in there, Motor City Bowl and stuff like that. So it's always fun to just like get on like the Score app and then look and see who's playing that day, because you might get a really fun game.
Yeah. Facts. Agreed, man. But once again, guys, thank you for watching. Hey, listen, with this podcast, again, hit the like button, hit the sub button, share this podcast with your college football friend fanatics. Tell them to come see about us. We're here every week, roughly every week here on the Freshman 15 podcast. So for me, LP Cruz, my co-host Tyler Moore, this has once again been the Freshman 15 College Football Podcast. Peace.